Okay, hi everyone. I'm not so used to I have a low girlish voice, but I will try to be loud so that you can all hear me. Um, okay, so thank you all for coming to this wonderful meetup, and I am very honored to be talking to you. Today, I will talk to you about a thing called Lanfrica and some of the work being done there. A little about me. So when people ask me what do I do, it's kind of hard to answer. What I usually tend to say is I wear many hats. So I work with a number of organizations and institutes. There's Mila, Masakane, Lanfrica too, and currently research at TUM. And we will go. Generally, my vision is to create impact in the world through, but hopefully AI. And when we look at machines and building machines, it's around trying to build better machine learning models that can learn better. And what does learning better mean? It means learning without requiring so much data. It means learning without being so wrong, learning when it's wrong. These are the kind of things that I'm working on. It's really about building better AI to create impact. So it cuts across NLP, but I also do work on causality and reinforcement learning. So these are my areas of interest, plus other things I'm generally interested in. But today is not about me. Today is about a different side of the world, a different side of the story. Generally, when you hear about AI, you hear about ChatGPT, you hear about stable diffusion, the wonderful things happening. But I think I want to take you to the other things you don't hear about, the not so popular languages or not so popular use cases that you don't hear about. So we'll start with what I call the tree of AI technologies, and we talk about the problem that we're working on at Lanfrica. Basically, that would define what Lanfrica is, the key milestones, and some looking forward in QA. It's going to be a really, it's an atypical type of talk. I'm not going to do any much research thing. I'm not going to show you numbers. I'm not going to show you flashy things. It's just really bringing in new perspectives to this community and new perspectives that you can take home with you. So we have a tree here, and this is what I call the tree of AI technologies. When you think of AI technologies, your ChatGPT, your Siri, your Alexa, your anything that has to do with some form of AI, I invite you to think of it as a tree. So what do you have in a tree? If you have done some agriculture, you put some seed there, you put some water, you take care of it, put some manure, and then it grows, right? It grows, it grows, it grows, and then it becomes a beautiful tree with fruits and leaves. This is how the aim of my whole talk today is just to let you imagine AI like this. The fruits and the leaves are the applications. So that's the chat GPTs or the wonderful AI integrations that we see in the world right now. And then you have come down to the branches, and that's the models actually powering the applications that you are using. So your Google Translate, your DeepL, there are models in the server that are actually powering them. And then you come down to the tick thing. I don't know the name, and you can imagine that as the analytics and pre-processing that's going on there. So the data analytics, data pre-processing that's going on that you feed into the model. So that's what you use to train the model. That's what you use to do inference when the model is trained. And down to the root, that's what you have, data. The takeaway I want to give from this talk is data is the root of the AI technologies that we see. When you internalize this concept of data being the root, it changes the way you think about data, changes the way you think about your data, about data in general, and you begin to see that the true potential of these AI technologies, what makes them so good, so smart, so wonderful, is actually the data, plus the algorithms and the compute and other things. But the point of this particular presentation is to really point out the impact and the usefulness and potential of data. So if data is the root, it means that if you want to make something work in terms of AI, you have to look at the root, right? If your tree is not doing well, it's not bringing out good seeds, maybe it's giving you orange instead of apples, there's a problem, you always go down to the root. What's happening down there in the root? So this is the preface to my discussion. So I started out to leverage AI to make the world a better place, basically, in a simple sense. And then I quickly discovered that while trying to make AI better for everyone, there are so many parts of the world that do not benefit or are not recognized by AI. So many communities, so many languages. So if you think about your native languages, the native languages that you speak, as great as ChatGPT is, it really cannot do well in these native languages. And when you think about there's 7,000 languages in the world, and then these wonderful AI only cover about 1%. That's alarming because the remaining 99% don't have any representation in the AI technology. And so coming down to a little continent called Africa, which I was born in Nigeria, so that's Western Africa, I discovered that many of these technologies do not support African languages. And you can also imagine for your own native languages. When AI and technologies don't support your language or don't support your context, it means that your culture is being excluded, right? It means that your culture and the way of life and your values are being excluded. So generally, Lanfrica is trying to change that. Lanfrica is now trying to work on the global south and try to leverage AI to improve lives in Africa. Now, when we want to say, okay, let's leverage AI to improve lives in Africa, we have to tackle the root problem. And so the root problem being data is what we're trying to tackle at Lanfrica. And that's one of the things, one of the hats I wear, one of the passion I have. So it's about Lanfrica is a community organization that's trying to be you can imagine as a data company. Basically, it's trying to tackle some of the data related challenges in the global south. And the aim of this discussion is to introduce some of the things we've done in Lanfrica and to inspire you to think about your languages, to think about your use cases, and basically to have this new concept about data and the importance of data in AI. Because data is you, right? Data, you are the one providing the data, right? The things you speak, the social media, everything you use, you're the one providing the data. So in the end, maybe the AI is actually you. It's actually an image, or it's built in your image because it's using your data. So when you think about AI like this, it's no longer a magical thing that's wow, that's wowing me and it's so amazing. It really comes down to the data that you are providing. Okay, so let's move into the African continent. One major problem that we discovered around AI on the African continent is a lack of training data. So again, we start from the root. If there's no training data, there's nothing you can do. You cannot train models, you cannot even do research or apply algorithms. And when you think about your different use cases, there's always this problem of lack of training data. But it's the lack of data is not just a simple thing. It's actually nuanced. There's so many parts to it. So right now in Germany and EU, there's the GDPR laws and data privacy and how that's affecting data sharing and everything. There are things to consider like data governance, who owns the data. Should the data be owned by one company or should it be decentralized? So there's so many aspects when you think about data. On the African continent, it's things like you have a lot of marginalized communities, or generally communities that do not benefit from the data. So I put data online, someone takes the data, builds one magnificent thing and sells to me, and I have no benefit from it. I mean, you can also relate to that in many of your use cases here. There's also the idea of the societal mindset, so that discourages you from speaking your language. So there's that happening on the African continent. There's skepticism and lack of inclination to share data. So we discovered that there are actually so many of these sub-problems associated with the lack of data. And so basically, Lanfrica, a community-driven organization, is trying to take these problems one by one based on 4 pillars. So one pillar is discoverability, the other one is creating the data, the other one is empowering, something called data farmers. If I have time, I will go into that. And yeah, grounded, impactful research. So we started with lack of data. There is lack of data, lack of African training data sets. And again, I'm using African, but I really encourage you to think about in your own case, in your own jobs, whatever you're doing, that you always have this problem of lack of data. So we started with lack of data, and we discovered that there's also a bigger problem. It's not really that there is a lack of data, like there is no data at all, like nil. There are actually few data, few efforts, few resources, some data on GitHub, some data in some Google Drive, different places. But so the problem is discoverability. It's not easy to find these resources for unpopular languages. So here's an example. When you go on Google and you're looking for a machine translation data set, so Afar is an African language. I don't want to go more into it. Just it's an unpopular language. No one here knows Afar. You can also think of your own native language or your own unpopular languages that you know of. You see that when you go on Google and you search for data sets for these languages, the results it gives you are not what you're looking for. It gives you things that you're not looking for. So it gives you this idea that it doesn't exist, right? Or nothing is being done there. So, but we discovered that that's not true. Actually, there are so many things being done, so many resources, data sets, models, linguistic research, but the problem is that it's hard to find them. And so at Lanfrica, we then decided to build an aggregator platform, a place that if you're looking for the unpopular languages, which Google will not, Bing will not be able to refer you to very well, you can come here and actually search for these resources and find what is existing. So here's a little demo of how it works. When you go to lanfrica.com, then you click on the browse records, and you have this interface here. On the left is the language, tasks, tags, and so many things. And on the right, you have the results. We started with languages. This was how the idea of Lanfrica was born. So we started with trying to work on languages, but the vision is to move beyond languages. So yeah, this is how it works when you go to lanfrica.com. And basically, we've been able to create a platform for different kinds of people. So for general users who are interested in, oh, what is AFAR? Let me go check that thing out and see what they're talking about. To NLP researchers who, for some reason, want to now include some other languages beyond the popular languages. To government officials and policymakers who are trying to understand the landscape of languages and which languages are represented and which ones should we put more effort in, which languages will be extinct soon and which ones need to be digitized. So the Lanfrica Records platform offers a place to find resources, and it's really, really important and interesting, the power of being able to find stuff. I mean, that's why Google search is where it is. It's so when you can find stuff, there's so much that can be done when you can just find stuff. So this was the first thing that we set out to solve. And like I said, we started with languages, but the vision really is to include more things, include linguistic publications, include policy documents, and a lot more of other things. And it's interesting because before I told you that lack of data sets, right? But just ending up 2022, we're able to cross marathon of curating and linking 1,000 resources. And we have just scratched the tip of the iceberg. So it really turns out that this idea of lack of, there really are resources. It's just, first of all, trying to solve the problem of discoverability, and then trying to solve other problems that come on top of that. Okay, so we tackled the problem of discoverability, basically making efforts and data sets more visible to everyone. The second one was, okay, how can we build and create more data sets? So in partnership with a host of organizations and collaborations, Masakane, Lapa, Google, so many organizations, we I've spent a huge chunk of my time building data sets for African languages. So there's data sets from part-of-speech tagging, named entity recognition, news classification, speech domain, so many data sets. And it's not just me. There's been so many other organizations, so many other researchers out there. And then through the Lanfrica record, it makes it very easy to find what has been done and what exists. And we have just on the Lanfrica record, which has less than 0.5% of the actual data sets in the world, we already have 357 plus data sets on African languages. So this goes to show the potential of making things discoverable. And the second part is taking the time to create data sets. It's very, very important to really put in effort in creating data sets, in annotating data sets, in preparing data sets. And one of the reasons why I'm giving this talk here is because when we talk of AI, we always talk about the flashy things, the front end and the interfaces, but they don't talk to you about the data efforts that they put in. So the data efforts are actually the soul of the flashy things you're seeing. And the more attention that we give to data, the better we get to understand what really AI is. Of course, the work that we have done at Lanfrica and in collaboration with other organizations, it goes beyond the data set. Because once you have the data set, you can now do a lot of things. You can benchmark models, you can train new models, you can build speech-based models, whatever models you want. You can then also look into solving real-world problems based on the models and the data sets that you have. So that's the part of the grounded, impactful research. There's been a lot and a host of research that we've been doing at Lanfrica, and it's really about solving impactful problems. What do I mean by impactful problems? You don't just build an AI because you can, because you think it will be good. That's good, and you can do that. But when you're looking at grounded, impactful research, you start from the bottom, from the ground up. You identify the problem that the community or the people or the client is really facing, and you identify the solution. You don't just, oh, this is the problem, let's throw in a large language model, that will solve it. No, you really identify the problem and try to build from the problem up and figure out if there's a way you could use AI to solve it. Most times you really see that you don't need to start with AI immediately. You can start with a simple regex thing and actually get something working like a proof of concept, and then now look into leveraging AI and large language models. So it's very important to start from the ground up, start from understanding the problem, understanding the reach of the problem, and then figuring out solutions, and not just throwing AI on everything. Okay, so I will go a bit into some of the principles that we are grounded on, and basically the ideas that set Lanfrica apart. Some of the principles that we're really excitedly and passionately working on. So one important one is the thing of data farming that I talked about. I don't know if anyone here has an idea of data farming. It has a definition in, I think, in some field. But this data farming in the area of data set is a new concept, and it's in opposition to data mining. So this is the pipeline that you're familiar with, right? You get the data set, you extract the data set from somewhere, or you take it from somewhere, you do some pre-processing, you build your model, and then you deploy. This is a typical machine learning pipeline. And what we're trying to do in data farming is to consider the data set providers. So these are the platforms, the organizations, the communities that provide the data. And when you start to think about the communities and the providers, we also start thinking about how can we give meaningful impact back to them, because if we're using their data, it's only fair that we give them back impact. Now, you can say that, well, Chris, if we build the app or the thing, the deployment, it will serve the community, right? And that's true. But when you think about the marginalized communities, the unpopular communities that you don't know of, you can think about your languages or your communities, you see that most of them don't get to use the app. Most of them is too expensive. Like, the communities could also have different needs, different things that they want. For example, one major trending strategy is I build this wonderful AI and I tell you go and use it and how to use it. You don't include the people who you're building the AI for. You just build something and impose on them on how to use it. But when you use this approach of data farming, you're actually including the communities or the people in the development of the AI. So you're taking their needs, you're taking their concerns into consideration. So data farming is really about thinking about the data providers, the people like you and I who provide their data when we subscribe to some Google technology, thinking about the marginalized communities whose data we're using, thinking about the organizations like Wikipedia or Lion that have provided enormous text data for these wonderful apps to be made, thinking about them and thinking about how to actually give meaningful impact back to them. Okay. And yeah, our second ethos is really on community collaboration partnerships, having these discussions. It's easy to go and download or scrape some data from the internet without caring about copyright, but it's hard to reach out to the person, try to form a partnership, understand what they want and how you can help them and figure out how to get the data. So that's why many companies prefer to just scrape data because that's easy. But when you really think about community and partnerships and collaboration, then it's also about having these difficult conversations and always thinking about how you can give back to the providers from whom you're collecting the data. So data farming and collaboration, these are basically the two ethos that we stand on. It's very difficult because this is not what many AI companies are doing, but this is something that we are really standing strong on and we're trying to work on, especially for the African continent and for marginalized communities. Okay, so yeah. So community and partnerships means you get to partner with a lot of people. It's not just the tech people and the data engineers or the CEOs, but you also consider the native speakers, the evaluators, the annotators, consider the local communities whose data you're using and who will be impacted by the AI that you're building. So you really get to think about all these factors in the wheel and partner with them, collaborate with them and have these conversations. And also include them in creating whatever AI technology that you're building. So at Lanfrica, we're trying to create this community of different people from different areas, different experiences, different expertise, and bring them together to help clients, to help organizations who are interested in building AI technologies for and on the African continent. And again, I invite you to take this and think about your job, because AI is now almost everywhere. Think about your job, think about your languages, think about your community, and see how some of these values and some of these insights could transfer. Yeah, so partnerships and collaboration. And so looking forward, we're just able to, I just showed you two, so making things easy to find and trying to help to create data in a natural way. So these are just two of the many problems that are out there when we talk about data for the African continent. And so there's a lot more to work on, and it's really, really exciting. I've spent a large part of my life working on algorithms. So at Mila, working on Yoshua Benjo's lab, it's about the algorithms and how to build better algorithms. In reinforcement learning, algorithms, NLP algorithms. So it's really interesting when you take a different side to things and you start thinking about data-centric AI, and looking more from the data angle. And there's been a lot of pioneering works about that. So ImageNet, which showed the power of deep learning models, was the data set that showed the power of the models. The data set led to the creation of these models and led to everyone knowing about the power of deep learning models. So data is very, very important. And when you think of AI technologies, think of them as this tree that comes down to data, which comes down to you. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you're interested in anything, discussing things in general. If you're interested in data-centric AI, feel free to reach out. And any other thing you're interested in, feel free to reach out. And yeah, you can connect with me, and that's it. You can take it away.
We have questions, maybe? If you're shy, don't worry. You can tell me, I can tell you the question. Maybe I can start and then people can get also. How do you deal with the kind of legal stuff, right? With the copyrights, etc. Because obviously it's also a big issue. And then just let's say downloading the books and then posing them as data sets. How do you have a special department on that side?
So I would say the way we deal with that is actually by having conversations about that. So actually bringing it to the table. Okay, let's talk about the copyright for the books. How do we figure that out? And then having, you could call it a department or a team that's really looking into that and figuring out ways around that. So that's how we deal with that at this moment. Yeah. It has led to things. It has led to a number of things like maybe some templates for data sharing. It's also led to discussions around data licenses and how to build better data licenses, how to enable people to understand data licenses. Because when you see a huge license, it's so complex. But how can you make it easy for people to understand? So basically what happens at Lanfrica is we have an issue like, oh, how do we deal with copyright? And then it leads to different projects, different exciting projects. And then we start working on them and see where that leads to. So it's really more like an R&D where you're experimenting with stuff, trying to see what works, what doesn't work. And the things that work end up becoming a platform that can be beneficial to society.
So people here even can go to your platform and upload some niche data set about Bavarian dialect and also then train models.
Yes, free to. You might not find Bavarian dialect when you search on the language, but that's
you can request and then
exactly. There's the contribution form and request, definitely. And also people, it's also not like part of the talk is also to inspire you, when you think of AI and really think about your languages, your community, think about these things, and it could inspire someone to create some kind of something for their own language. I've heard people building models for their language. So yeah, those are the kind of inspirations that I want to give from this talk.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, of course, the radical thing is that you are including so many languages which would otherwise go unnoticed. But of course, the more radical thing is that you said you want to benefit the data providers or whoever farms the data, which is like, nobody does that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're saying that if you did not have Lanfrica, then people would probably scrape the data and find like low quality data for training the models. But for those providers of models that are creating the most popular models out there, aren't you making it easy for them to actually scrape you now?
Yeah, I see. That's a good question. Yeah, that's also part of the discussion that we've been having, right? Because yeah, we've also had some people say, okay, you beg this data, you put online, and then these big tech bros come and take the data. So it's part of the discussion that we're having. And so there's a way to think about it. You can think about it in the fearful way, like, oh my God, we're gonna make them come and scrape us and make us extinct. But I think I'm really obliged to think about solutions around that. So, for example, we've had partnerships with some of these big tech companies, and these partnerships with Mastercard has led to their investing in actually creating this data on the terms of the community. So, taking their privacy, taking their ownership considerations into account. So that's a good thing happening. There's also talk about licenses and how do we work with data licenses such that we don't make it easy for people to exploit our data, but we also don't make it like unfriendly to people who want to come and use the data. So these are some of the ongoing discussions and work that we have around that.
I have a question. So, you talked about data sets. Do you also have a catalog of the key challenges that you're trying to solve as part of it? Means where you think Africa needs help or volunteers or any of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. A catalog of the key challenges, we don't have that as a catalog. What we do have is the Lanfrica blog, where we are now trying to, some of these ideas we're working on, some of the things we're working on, we're trying to write them and publish them for people to know about them.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
According to the presentation, you are creating different data sets. So
different NLP. Are you also creating like big corpuses to create language models?
So yeah, the idea of data sets is it's not just small data sets. It's also how to create large data sets that can be used to build large foundational models. So I would say yes, we're also doing that. Of course, it becomes very intricate how large it can be with these languages. Yes, please.
I think that we got also to make a compilation from one language to another one. I mean, from the original languages of Africa.
Sorry, again?
And this also included so like grammar rules to make compilation from one language to another one, for instance.
Yes.
Yes. And you're also collecting cultural data from different cultures that people are interested in, beliefs, customs, and things like that.
Yes.
We also do it.
Yes. We're also working on that. Yes. I like this part of the cultural data because that's very interesting. So we're also looking at the data, the culture. Do we have time for more questions? Or? Okay. And yeah, please.
You were saying that the resources available were curated by you?
No, not all the resources are created. No. It's a host of different people and organizations.
Okay, so there's no standardized curation process.
How do you mean?
Maybe I'm just I misheard. Okay.
I see.
But related to that, I mean, there is resources for some very few languages that, I mean, I saw Yoruba, for example, or Amharic, and they're represented in some common corpora. So is it possible that basically those are duplicate, like the subset of some of the existing corpora?
No, that's not possible because the data sets that are created are not most times are not created from the internet. They're really created from the cultural data, like from the ground up with the community or from some organization that's working with the communities that speak the language. So it's not really about extracting the common data. So the data sets that we create, so the point I made was I have been a part of some of the data sets being created, but not all of them. There's so many other people who are working on that. And the data sets being created offer unique value to the already existing ones. So that's how it helps these other existing data sets in the other languages.
So every single resource that you offer happens by following that procedure of farming that you described.
Most likely, I would say most likely. Because so Lanfrica is doing two things. One is aggregating. So all the things are out there that exist, making it discoverable. And the second one is putting some efforts with collaborations to build data sets. So some of the data sets that we are kind of publicizing, we don't know how they were created, but most likely it's through some community involvement. Yeah.
One more.
I'm curious, you seem to be dedicating, like your project seems to be dedicated specifically for the smaller languages which are underrepresented in these very big models, like GPT or pick your poison note, Claude, whatever. But aren't they kind of conflicting points of the large language models need a lot of data, need a lot of resources, and are kind of benefiting from these very centralized organizations that have a huge amount of money to train them, versus this very specialized, this is a language that has a lot of peculiarities and is very specific to itself, let's say. Aren't they conflicting interests for the way that LLMs exist today?
So the way the LLMs exist, right, you need a lot of data, you train on this huge data, but then after you have the LLM, you usually fine tune it. So depending on your use case, you fine tune. So I think this is where the work that we're doing on the lower languages complements the LLMs, because you have a huge data that has learned from so much language resources, and now let's say some company or whatever wants to apply it to these low resource language because maybe they want to expand their market or maybe for some other reason. And before you wouldn't be able to, but now with this small data set, as you call them, you can now fine tune on this domain and then serve it on the data set. That's how we complement.